Ann Arbor, Michigan, always felt like a warm hug, especially in the autumn. The leaves would turn these incredible shades of red and gold, and the air would get that crisp, clean smell that just made you want to pull on a cozy sweater and walk hand in hand with someone you loved. For years, that someone was my wife, Sarah. I'm Eleanor Vance, and at 32, I thought I had it all figured out. I had a good job as a librarian at the public library, surrounded by stories and the quiet comfort of books. It wasn't a flashy career, but it was fulfilling. I loved helping people find their next great adventure between the pages, or seeing a child's eyes light up when they discovered a new favorite character. My life with Sarah was, to my mind, perfect. We met in college, two young women finding our way, and from the moment we started talking over a shared love for obscure indie films, I knew she was it for me. We built a home together, a small but charming house with a porch swing and a garden that I tried my best to keep alive, though my thumb was definitely not green. Sarah was a graphic designer, artistic and a little bit wild, always pushing me out of my comfort zone in the best possible way. She made me laugh, she challenged me, and I honestly believed we were one of those couples people looked at and thought, now that's love. Our evenings were usually spent cooking together, me with a glass of cheap wine, Sarah with some craft beer she'd picked up from a local brewery. We'd talk about our days, dream about future vacations, or just sit in comfortable silence, reading side by side. Our friends envied our easy rapport, the way we finished each other's sentences, the inside jokes that had grown and blossomed over more than a decade together. I felt safe with Sarah, loved, completely seen. It was a foundation, solid and true, or so I thought. The cracks started subtly, like hairline fractures in a beloved ceramic bowl. At first, I barely noticed them. Sarah started working later, always with a plausible explanation, a big client, a deadline, a new project, I understood. Her job was demanding and she was dedicated. I'd make dinner and keep a plate warm for her, sometimes falling asleep on the couch waiting for her to come home. When she did arrive, she'd be tired, distant. Long day, Elle, she'd murmur, kissing my forehead before heading straight to bed. The spontaneity in our lives began to fade. The easy laughter became less frequent. Our shared quiet became less comfortable, more like a void. I tried to talk to her, of course. Is everything okay, sweetie? I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light, not wanting to sound like I was accusing her of anything. She'd always brush it off, say she was stressed or tired or just going through a creative slump. And I, being the trusting fool I was, believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Sarah, my Sarah, the woman who had promised me forever under a canopy of twinkling lights in our backyard. Then came the phone. It was a Tuesday, a day I had off from the library. I was doing a deep clean of the living room, humming along to some old folk songs when I found it. Sarah's work phone, tucked under a cushion on the sofa. She usually kept it with her, glued to her hip. I figured she must have left it in a hurry that morning. My first instinct was to just put it on her bedside table, but then it buzzed. A notification. Not a text message, but a dating app alert. Bumble of all things, my stomach dropped like a stone in a well. My hands started to shake. Bumble? Why would Sarah have Bumble on her work phone? We were married. Happily married. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe she was researching something for a client. A new logo for a dating app? It sounded ridiculous even to me, but I desperately wanted to believe it. My fingers, trembling, unlocked the screen. The profile was active. Her picture, smiling brightly, was there. And then I saw the messages, dozens of them, not just with one person, but with several. Flirty messages, suggestive ones, plans for coffee, for drinks, for getting together. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. It felt like I'd been punched, hard, right in the gut. All those late nights, all that distance, all the brushed off concerns, it all coalesced into one horrifying truth. Sarah was cheating on me, my Sarah. My world, the one I had built so carefully, so lovingly around us, crumbled in that instant. The warmth of Ann Arbor, the cozy house, the comfort of our life, it all turned to ash. I don't remember much of what happened in the next few hours. A blur of tears, of nausea, of a cold, searing anger I had never known I was capable of. I scrolled through more messages, each one a fresh stab to my heart. Plans for a weekend trip, a hotel booking confirmation. It wasn't just a casual flirtation. It was an ongoing, active affair, or rather affairs. The sheer audacity, the betrayal, the callous disregard for everything we had shared, it was unfathomable. When Sarah finally came home that evening, her usual tired demeanor was still in place. She walked in, tossed her keys on the counter, and gave me a faint smile. Hey, Elle. Long one today. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a stranger. The woman I loved was a phantom, replaced by this deceitful impostress. My voice, when it came out, was a raw whisper. I know all about your long day, Sarah. She paused, keys still in hand, her smile fading. Her eyes, usually so bright and full of life, became guarded. What are you talking about? I picked up her work phone, which I had carefully placed on the coffee table. I held it up, screen facing her, displaying one of the most incriminating conversations. This, I said, my voice gaining strength, though it still trembled with rage. I'm talking about this and all the others. The color drained from her face, her jaw went slack. The confident, artistic Sarah vanished, replaced by a terrified, cornered animal. She tried to stammer out an explanation, something about stress, about a mistake, but the words caught in her throat. There were no excuses, no justifications that could possibly erase the image of her profile on that dating app, the flirtatious messages, the plans for secret encounters. That night was a torrent of accusations, denials, and finally a broken confession. She admitted it, not everything, not yet, but enough to confirm my worst fears. She'd been seeing someone, she said, just one person, a colleague, but I had seen the evidence on her phone. It was more than one. I pushed, I demanded, I screamed. The quiet librarian, the gentle Eleanor, was gone. In her place was a woman shattered, enraged, and utterly lost. Our beautiful home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. Every object, every shared memory was tainted. The porch swing, the garden, even the books on the shelves, they all mocked me with their false sense of security. How could I have been so blind? How could I have given so much of myself to someone who could so easily discard me for a cheap thrill? The betrayal wasn't just a knife to the heart, it was a total demolition of my entire reality. The love I felt for her curdled into a bitter, burning resentment. This wasn't just about hurt anymore. This was about justice. This was about making her understand the depth of the damage she had inflicted. This was about revenge. And I knew, with a chilling clarity, that I wouldn't rest until I found a way to make her pay. My world was in pieces, and I was going to make sure hers was too. The night of Sarah's confession was a blur of raw emotions. After my initial outburst, a heavy, suffocating silence fell between us. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa, head in her hands, mumbling apologies that felt hollow and insincere. I paced, the anger a burning coal in my chest, making it hard to breathe. The air in our home, once so familiar and comforting, now felt thick with betrayal and resentment. I didn't want to hear her excuses, I just wanted to know how she could have done this. How could the woman I loved, the woman who had shared every secret, every dream, with me for over a decade, have so casually dismantled our life? I asked her again about the other profiles, the other messages I'd seen. She swore it was only one person, a moment of weakness that spiraled. But my gut and the evidence on her phone screamed otherwise. Her denials only fueled my rage. It felt like she was still trying to protect herself, still trying to minimize the damage, instead of truly acknowledging the vast chasm she had opened between us. We ended up in separate rooms that night, the space between us wider than any ocean. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for clues, for signs I had missed. Had she always been this capable of deception? Had our love been a lie from the beginning? The questions tormented me, leaving me feeling hollowed out and utterly alone. The days that followed were a surreal nightmare. We lived under the same roof, but we were ghosts to each other. The easy conversations were replaced by strained silences. Meals were eaten in separate rooms or not at all. The house that had once echoed with laughter now felt like a tomb. Sarah tried to act normal, to make small talk, but I couldn't. Every time she looked at me, I saw the lie. Every time she touched me, I flinched internally. My body, my heart, my mind, they all rejected her. It was Sarah who suggested therapy, a desperate plea to salvage something, anything from the wreckage. I was hesitant, cynical even. What could a stranger say that would mend a wound so deep? But a part of me, a small, fragile part, still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, our 10 years together weren't entirely meaningless. Maybe there was a way back, or at least a path to understanding. And I admit, a darker part of me saw it as an opportunity. A place where she would be forced to confront her actions, to articulate the pain she had caused, and perhaps truly understand the extent of my suffering. My revenge, I realized, didn't have to be loud or public. It could be a slow, methodical dismantling of her peace, just as she had dismantled mine. Our first few sessions with Dr. Evans, a kind-faced woman with a gentle voice, were excruciating. I went in with good intentions, truly, I did. I wanted to be open, to work through the tangled mess of emotions that choked me. I wanted to understand how my wife, my partner, could have betrayed me so completely. But every time Sarah spoke, every time she offered a carefully worded apology or tried to explain her reasons, a red mist descended. My voice would become sharp, my responses clipped and hostile. I couldn't help it. The wounds were too fresh, the anger too potent. Dr. Evans would try to mediate, to guide us towards constructive dialogue, but it felt impossible. Sarah would talk about her stress at work, her feelings of being overwhelmed, her perception that I was sometimes too focused on my books or my quiet routines. And I would snap. So, my love for a quiet life, my dedication to my job, my very being, was an excuse for you to sleep with other people? I'd challenge, my voice rising. Is that what you're saying, Sarah? That I pushed you into the arms of strangers? The sessions often ended with me feeling more enraged than when we started, and Sarah looking defeated and teary-eyed. Dr. Evans, bless her patience, tried to make us see each other's perspectives, but I wasn't ready to see anything but my own pain. I wasn't ready to forgive or even to understand. I was just angry and hurt. So deeply, irrevocably hurt. One afternoon, after a particularly explosive session, Dr. Evans sighed, her gaze moving from me to Sarah and back again. Perhaps, she began, her voice soft but firm, you two need some space. It seems like the anger is too raw right now to make any real progress together. Maybe a temporary separation could provide some clarity, some perspective. The suggestion hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. I felt a flicker of something, relief perhaps, at the thought of not having to pretend anymore, of not having to share a space with the architect of my misery. But Sarah, to my surprise, immediately recoiled. No, she cried, her voice cracking. No, I don't want that. I want to work this out, Eleanor. I want to be with you. You're who I want to be with. Her insistence baffled me. After everything, after the revelations, the lies, the sheer devastation she had wrought, she still clung to the idea of us. Was it guilt, fear of being alone? Or was it some twisted form of manipulation, a last-ditch effort to keep me tethered to her? I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a flicker of genuine desperation in her eyes. It confused me. Part of me, the old, naive Eleanor, felt a pang of pity. The larger, more dominant part, the one fueled by betrayal, felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. She wanted me, after what she did? The irony was almost laughable. Dr. Evans, ever the professional, nodded slowly. Sarah, I hear you, but for Eleanor to even consider a future with you, there needs to be complete honesty. No more half-truths, no more minimizing. Everything needs to be on the table. Only then can we even begin to assess if there's a foundation left to rebuild on. She paused, her gaze resting on Sarah. I'm going to challenge you, Sarah. In our next appointment, I want a full disclosure. Everything. Every person, every instance, every detail. If you truly want to move forward, you need to tell Eleanor everything that has ever happened. Only then can we try. The words hit me like a physical blow, a full disclosure, everything. My stomach churned, a volatile mix of dread and a perverse curiosity. I wanted to know. I desperately, morbidly wanted to know the full extent of her deception, the full catalog of my humiliation. How many people? How often? Where? The questions had gnawed at me, festering in the dark corners of my mind, and now finally they would be answered. But the fear was equally potent. What if the truth was even worse than I imagined? What if the details were so gruesome, so utterly devastating that they would break me completely? Could I truly handle hearing every sordid detail of my wife's infidelity? It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, wanting to see what was at the bottom, but terrified of the fall. The thought of it made my heart pound, a frantic drum beat against my ribs. I said nothing, just stared at Sarah, who now looked ashen, her face a mask of terror. This was it, the moment of reckoning, the moment where all her carefully constructed lies would be torn down, piece by painful piece. And as I looked at her, a cold, hard resolve settled within me. This wasn't just about truth anymore. This was about watching her squirm, about making her confess every single transgression, every single betrayal. My quiet revenge had begun, and the full disclosure was just the first step. I wanted to see her stripped bare, exposed just as I had been. The pain she had caused me, I was determined to make sure she felt a fraction of it. This wasn't about healing, it was about payback. The librarian in me, the one who loved stories, was now writing a new chapter, one filled with justice and a chilling sense of poetic retribution. Ann Arbor, the city of warmth, now felt like a cold, calculating stage for my unfolding plan. The days leading up to that full disclosure session with Dr. Evans were a torment. Every ticking second felt like an eternity, stretching out like a thin, brittle wire. Sarah moved through our house like a ghost, pale and silent, her eyes darting to me with a mixture of fear, and something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it guilt, or just the dread of what was to come? I didn't speak to her, not really. I couldn't. My mind was a battlefield, warring between the morbid desire to know every single detail of her betrayal and the terrifying premonition that the truth would utterly destroy me. I spent my evenings buried in books, not reading them, but staring blankly at the pages, the words blurring into an incomprehensible mess. The quiet hum of Ann Arbor outside, the gentle rustle of leaves against the window, usually brought me comfort. Now it just felt like a mockery, a peaceful backdrop to the raging storm inside me. I'd replay snippets of conversations, Sarah's half-hearted apologies, her vague explanations. Each memory was a shard of glass twisting deeper into my already wounded heart. I found myself obsessively cleaning, scrubbing at surfaces as if I could wipe away the stain of her deception from our home, from my life. It was a futile effort, of course. The grime was too deep, too ingrained. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued me, vivid and cruel, filled with images of Sarah laughing with strangers, her touch, her smiles, given freely to others while I lay alone, oblivious. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart hammering, the rage of fresh, potent poison in my veins. My librarian's calm, collected demeanor had shattered, leaving behind a raw, exposed nerve. At work, I was efficient but distant, helping patrons find their books with a forced smile, my thoughts always drifting back to the impending session. My colleagues, used to my quiet friendliness, noticed my withdrawal, but I offered no explanations. How could I? How could I tell them that my perfect life, my perfect marriage, was a carefully constructed lie built on the foundation of my wife's deceit? The morning of the appointment dawned gray and oppressive, mirroring my mood. A chill wind rattled the windows, and the world outside seemed muted, drained of color. I dressed in a dark, practical outfit, armor for the battle I knew was coming. Sarah was already up, sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of coffee growing cold in front of her. Her hands were clasped tightly, her knuckles white. She looked small, vulnerable, and a tiny, almost imperceptible part of me, the old Eleanor, felt a flicker of something akin to pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the burning resentment. This vulnerability was a consequence of her choices, not mine. The drive to Dr. Evans' office was silent, heavy with unspoken accusations and dread. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, watching the familiar Ann Arbor streets pass by, but seeing nothing. The trees, usually so vibrant in their autumn glory, now looked like skeletal fingers grasping at a bleak sky. We walked into the waiting room, the air thick with unspoken tension, and took separate seats as far apart as possible. The magazines on the table, brightly colored and cheerful, seemed grotesquely out of place. When Dr. Evans called us in, her voice was gentle, but her gaze was sharp, assessing. She must have seen the emotional bruising on both our faces. We sat in the same chairs as always, but this time the dynamic felt different. The air crackled with a charged energy, a prelude to an explosion. Dr. Evans began by reiterating the purpose of the session. Sarah, she said, her voice soft but firm, you understand what we discussed. For any hope of moving forward, Eleanor needs to hear the full truth. There can be no more omissions, no more downplaying. This is your opportunity to lay everything bare. Sarah nodded, her throat working, her eyes fixed on her hands. I watched her, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Part of me wanted to scream at her to just get it over with, to rip off the band-aid and let the wound bleed. Another part was bracing for impact, knowing that what was coming would be devastating. She started hesitantly, her voice barely a whisper. It, it started about 2 years ago. 2 years, my breath hitched, 2 years of lies, 2 years of believing we were happy while she was building a secret life. She described the first encounter, a colleague from a design agency she sometimes collaborated with. Mark, she called him. A fling, she insisted, just a moment of weakness, fueled by stress and feeling unseen. I scoffed internally. Unseen. I had seen her, truly seen her, more than anyone else ever had. But I bit my tongue, holding on to Dr. Evans' instruction to let her speak. Then came the flood. After Mark, there was another, and another. Not just colleagues, but people she met through Bumble, people she connected with at industry events, even a casual acquaintance from a coffee shop. It wasn't just one affair or even two. It was a string of them, some short-lived, some lasting for months, overlapping in a sickening tapestry of deceit. My head spun. The names, the places, the dates blurred into a sickening kaleidoscope. Weekend trips, she confessed, weren't for client meetings but for clandestine rendezvous in hotels in Detroit or Chicago. Late nights at work were often spent at bars, or sometimes at the apartments of these strangers, these other people who knew a version of my wife I had never seen. She spoke of the thrill, the excitement of being desired, of feeling alive, in a way she claimed she hadn't felt with me. Each word was a fresh, excruciating stab. The casualness with which she recounted these intimate betrayals, the way she downplayed the emotional impact on me, was infuriating. It wasn't just physical. It was an emotional infidelity that had eaten away at the core of our relationship, leaving a hollow shell. She confessed to lying about her phone, having a separate one for these encounters, one I had never found. The work phone I discovered was just a slip-up, a rookie mistake in her elaborate web of lies. My discovery had only scratched the surface. As she spoke, her voice gaining a desperate, almost manic quality, I felt a strange detachment. The initial shock, the raw pain, was still there, but it was now overlaid with a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't the woman I loved. This was a stranger, a deceitful, self-serving stranger who had systematically dismantled my life, my trust, my very sense of self-worth. The image of her, my Sarah, the one I had built a future with, crumbled into dust. Dr. Evans watched me carefully, occasionally interjecting with a question to Sarah, pressing for more details, more specifics. Sarah would wince, her face contorting in shame, but she continued. The dam had broken, and the torrent of truth was overwhelming. She admitted to feeling guilty, to hating herself for what she was doing, but the pull of the thrill, the escape, was too strong. She talked about a deep-seated insecurity, a need for external validation that she felt she wasn't getting from our quiet life. So, my quiet life was the problem? I finally interjected, my voice surprisingly steady, devoid of the usual tremor of rage. My love for books, for our home, for the peace we built together. That was so unsatisfying that you had to seek excitement in the arms of strangers? My eyes bored into hers, searching for something anything that resembled the woman I once knew. There was only fear and a shallow, performative remorse. Sarah flinched. No, Eleanor, it was. It wasn't you, it was me. I was selfish, I was lost. But her words rang hollow. It was me, in a way. My existence, my love, my quiet contentment had not been enough for her. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just about her cheating, it was about her fundamental dissatisfaction with me, with us. By the end of the session, I was a shell. My head ached, my eyes burned, and my heart felt like a shriveled, dusty thing. Sarah was sobbing, her disclosure finally complete, leaving her utterly exposed and vulnerable. But I felt no pity. Only a chilling void, a profound sense of loss, and a steel hard resolve. The hope, that tiny, fragile spark that had clung to the idea of reconciliation, was finally, irrevocably extinguished. There was nothing left to salvage. Our beautiful, carefully constructed life was not merely cracked, it was atomized, reduced to meaningless particles. Dr. Evans looked at me with a profound sadness in her eyes. Eleanor, she said gently, how are you feeling? I met her gaze, and for the first time in weeks, my voice was clear, strong, and unwavering. I began, the words slow and deliberate, like I've been living a lie for 2 years. I feel like the person I married never existed. I looked directly at Sarah, whose sobs intensified. And I feel nothing for you now, Sarah, nothing but contempt. The words were a hammer blow, not just to Sarah, but to the last vestiges of my old self. I had been brought to my lowest point. My entire world had been revealed as a sham, every tender moment, every shared dream tainted by her betrayal. The pain was immense, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. But beneath that pain, a new emotion stirred, cold and sharp. The revenge I had vaguely contemplated, the quiet dismantling of her peace, now solidified into a concrete, unyielding purpose. She had taken everything from me, stripped me bare. Now it was my turn to do the same to her. I would not allow her to walk away from this with a clear conscience, or with any semblance of the life she had so carelessly destroyed. Ann Arbor, my once beloved home, was now the stage for my justice, and I was ready to play my part. The librarian, usually a keeper of stories, was now about to write her own, a story of calculated, unforgettable retribution. Leaving Dr. Evans' office that day felt like breaking free from a suffocating cage, but it wasn't freedom I sought, not yet. It was the cold, calculated air of a battlefield. Sarah was still sobbing when I walked out, her apologies echoing down the hallway, but they were just noise to me now, meaningless vibrations in the air. I didn't look back. The woman weeping in that room was a stranger, a ghost of a love that had never truly existed. The drive home was different. The gray, oppressive sky of the morning now seemed perfectly suited to my internal landscape. Ann Arbor, once my haven, was now just a setting, a chessboard for the game I was about to play. I pulled into the driveway, got out of the car, and walked into the house that had once been our home but now felt like a crime scene. Sarah was already there, huddled on the sofa, her face puffy and red. She looked up when I entered, her eyes pleading. Eleanor, please, she choked out, her voice raw. Please, can we talk? I know it's a lot, but I truly want to fix this. I love you. The words were a hammer striking cold steel. Love? What did she know of love? Her love was a lie, a flimsy facade she had hidden behind while she built a secret life. My heart, which had felt like a shriveled thing in Dr. Evans' office, now hardened, encased in a shell of ice. There's nothing to fix, Sarah, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I walked past her, heading straight for our bedroom, the room we had shared for years. The room where we had made promises, whispered secrets, and built dreams. It now felt defiled. I started packing. Not just a few things, not an overnight bag, but everything that was mine. My clothes, my books, my photographs, the small trinkets and mementos that held meaning only for me. I worked methodically, silently, pulling suitcases from the back of the closet, folding clothes with a precision that belied the storm raging within me. Sarah followed me, hovering in the doorway, her pleas growing more desperate. What are you doing? Where are you going? Eleanor, you can't just leave? I didn't answer. Each item I packed was a step away from her, a physical manifestation of the chasm she had created. The sight of my books, my true companions, filled me with a strange sense of resolve. They had always been there for me, honest and unwavering, unlike the person I had married. Finally, when the suitcases were full and a small box of personal items was taped shut, I turned to face her. She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face, her hands clasped in front of her like a supplicant. This isn't what you want, Eleanor, she sobbed. You said you wanted to work it out. The therapy? I cut her off, my voice still eerily calm. The therapy was for me to understand the depth of your betrayal, Sarah. And now I do. It's not about working things out anymore. It's about consequences. I grabbed my car keys from the dresser, my gaze fixed on hers. I'm staying with my sister for a while. Don't try to call me. Don't try to come there. We'll communicate through Dr. Evans if necessary about the house, about anything else that needs to be handled. Her face crumpled. But the house, our house? It's not our house anymore, Sarah. You made sure of that. I picked up my packed bags, the weight a physical representation of the burden I was carrying. As I walked past her out of the bedroom and through the living room, she stood there, a statue of despair. I opened the front door, the crisp autumn air feeling like a cleansing breath after the suffocating atmosphere inside. I paused, one hand on the doorknob, and turned back to her. You stripped me bare, Sarah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper but laced with a chilling intensity. You took my trust, my peace, my entire reality, and shattered it into a million pieces. You thought I was quiet, that I was easily dismissed, perhaps even weak. But a librarian knows the power of stories, Sarah. And I'm about to write a new one for you, a story of retribution. Then I walked out, closing the door softly behind me, leaving her alone in the wreckage she had created. The Ann Arbor autumn, with its vibrant colors, now felt like a dramatic backdrop to my quiet, fierce resolve. My sister Clara lived about 30 minutes away, in a charming little bungalow on the outskirts of town. She was 5 years older than me, a fiery, no-nonsense woman who had always been my rock. When I called her, my voice still shaking despite my composure with Sarah, she simply said, "Come on over, Elle. The guest room's ready, and I've got wine." Clara knew. She hadn't needed details, just the tremor in my voice. She'd always had a knack for sensing my unspoken emotions. Arriving at her place, I collapsed onto her sofa, the dam finally breaking. The anger, the pain, the humiliation, it all came rushing out in a torrent of tears and choked sobs. Clara just held me, stroking my hair, murmuring comforting words. She didn't offer platitudes or try to minimize my grief. She just let me feel it, let me grieve the death of my marriage, the death of the woman I thought I knew. Later, over a shared bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, I recounted everything. The Bumble profile, the messages, the agonizing months of denial, the gut-wrenching full disclosure in Dr. Evans' office. Clara listened, her expression shifting from shock to disbelief to a simmering rage that mirrored my own. That, that ungrateful, deceitful bitch, Clara finally spat, her eyes flashing. Eleanor, I swear to God, if I ever see her, I'll. She trailed off, searching for a suitable threat, but the sheer enormity of Sarah's betrayal rendered her momentarily speechless. I know, I whispered, my voice hoarse. But I'm not going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me completely broken, Clara. I'm not going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She needs to understand what she did. She needs to feel it. Clara looked at me, her gaze softening slightly, but still with that hard edge of protective anger. What are you thinking, Elle? She asked, knowing that when a quiet librarian like me talked about retribution, it wasn't going to involve a baseball bat. It would be something far more insidious, far more devastating in its own way. I took a sip of wine, the warmth spreading through me, a small spark of a plan beginning to ignite in the cold void of my heart. Sarah values her image, her reputation as a successful creative graphic designer. She prides herself on her artistic integrity, her network, her connections in the Ann Arbor art scene. Clara nodded slowly, a grin starting to form on her face. Ah, I'm following you. So we're going for a professional hit then? Precisely, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. She built a whole career on trust and perception, on being seen as reliable and innovative. What happens when that trust is eroded? What happens when her carefully curated image cracks, revealing the deceit beneath? The plan began to form, swirling in my mind like a dark, intricate pattern. Sarah's professional life was a delicate ecosystem, reliant on referrals, good reviews, and a stellar reputation. A few well-placed whispers, a few carefully timed revelations, could unravel years of painstaking work. I was a librarian, a keeper of information, and I knew how to use information as a weapon. My first step would be to get copies of all the shared financial documents. Bank statements, joint accounts, credit cards, anything that would give me a clear picture of our financial situation, and more importantly, her spending habits during the period of her infidelity. I had a sickening suspicion that her clandestine rendezvous weren't free. Hotels, dinners, gifts, it all cost money. And a good portion of that money, I realized with a fresh surge of fury, was probably mine. Our joint savings, the money we had been putting aside for a future that now lay in ruins. Clara, ever practical, pulled out her laptop. Okay, so let's get organized. What do you need first? Access to bank accounts? Password changes? We need to lock her out of anything you share and get copies of everything. We spent the next few days in a haze of legal and financial maneuvers. I called our bank, informed them of the impending separation, and requested statements going back 2 years. I contacted our credit card companies, setting up separate accounts, and ensuring that any new charges from Sarah's cards would not impact my credit. I changed passwords on all shared online accounts, meticulously combing through emails and cloud storage for any digital breadcrumbs she might have left. It was painstaking, soul-sucking work, but with each step I felt a flicker of empowerment. I was taking back control, piece by agonizing piece. During this time, Sarah attempted to contact me repeatedly. Texts, emails, even a voicemail left on Clara's landline, tearfully begging me to come home. I ignored them all. Clara, meanwhile, intercepted any attempts she made to come to the bungalow, firmly but politely telling her that Eleanor was not available and all communication should go through legal channels. The silence from my end was, I knew, a form of torture for Sarah. She was used to my presence, my quiet stability. Now she was faced with an impenetrable wall, but my primary focus was on information. As a librarian, I understood the power of a well-placed detail, a carefully sourced fact. Sarah's confession in therapy had given me names, locations, and a timeline. The dating app information on her work phone had given me even more. I began to cross-reference, to dig. I started with the names of the colleagues she had mentioned, discreetly searching LinkedIn, looking for any connections, any shared projects, any hints of professional impropriety. It was slow work, like sifting through sand for grains of gold, but I was patient, I was thorough, and I was driven by a cold, relentless fury. Each discovery, each confirmation of her lies solidified my resolve. One name in particular stood out. A man named David, whom Sarah had described as a brief fling, but whose name appeared in several of the more intimate messages I'd found. A quick search revealed he was a prominent figure in the local advertising scene, someone whose professional reputation was just as vital as Sarah's. A thought began to coalesce, a truly wicked idea that brought a chilling smile to my lips. The idea was to subtly leak information, not outright accusations, but enough verifiable facts to create doubt, to chip away at her professional standing. The Ann Arbor creative community, while vibrant, was also surprisingly small and interconnected. Reputations, once tarnished, were difficult to restore. My revenge wouldn't be loud or dramatic, but a quiet, insidious erosion of everything she held dear. I would make sure her carefully crafted world crumbled, just as mine had. And I would do it with the meticulous precision of a librarian, fact by undeniable fact. This wasn't just about anger anymore, it was about calculated, poetic justice. And I was just getting started. The quiet Eleanor Vance, the woman who loved stories, was now writing her own dark tale of retribution, one chapter at a time. The information I had gathered, piece by painstaking piece, felt like a loaded weapon. Sarah's confession, the details from her work phone, and the financial records Clara and I had meticulously sorted through, painted a picture of calculated deceit. It wasn't just a few mistakes. It was a systematic pattern of infidelity that had sickeningly intertwined with her professional life. Hotels, expensive dinners, lavish gifts for her various paramours, all paid for, in part, with money from our joint accounts, money I had earned. The rage, which had simmered beneath the surface, now solidified into a cold, focused resolve. My target, David. Sarah had described him as a brief fling, but the messages I had found between them were anything but brief or casual. He was a well-respected figure in Ann Arbor's advertising community, known for his impeccable ethics and family man image. This made him a perfect, unsuspecting pawn in my game of retribution. I wasn't interested in destroying his life, not really. He was just a means to an end. My goal was to create enough ripple in his world to cause a tsunami in Sarah's. Clara, ever the pragmatist, helped me refine the strategy. We can't just go blabbing, Elle, she cautioned. That makes you look bitter and crazy. We need to be subtle, plant seeds of doubt, let people connect the dots themselves. She was right. As a librarian, I knew the power of an unconfirmed rumor, the way a question mark could fester in the minds of the curious. Ann Arbor's creative scene thrived on networking, on trust, and on maintaining a pristine professional image. A few well-placed suggestions could easily contaminate that ecosystem. My first move was indirect. I knew Sarah had been working on a pitch for a major local client, a beloved Ann Arbor bakery chain, a project she was particularly proud of. I also knew that David's agency was in contention for the same project. Using an anonymous email, created through a burner account and routed through a VPN, I sent a tip to a well-known industry blog that covered local advertising news. The email was simple, brief, and contained no direct accusations. It merely hinted at unprofessional conduct between key players at two competing agencies, suggesting a conflict of interest that could compromise the integrity of the pitching process. I mentioned no names, no specifics, just enough to pique curiosity and set the rumor mill churning. The blog picked up on the hint, running a speculative piece about the intense competition for the bakery account and the unusual whispers of ethical concerns within the bidding process. It was vague, but within the close-knit Ann Arbor community, it was enough. People started talking, wondering which agencies were involved, which individuals. Doubt, like a slow-acting poison, had entered the bloodstream. Next, I turned my attention to David's online presence. He was active on LinkedIn, constantly posting about his agency's successes, his dedication to his family, and his commitment to ethical business practices. I found an old, seemingly innocuous photo Sarah had posted months ago on her public Instagram, a group shot at an industry event. In the background, partially obscured, was David. I saved the image. Then, I created a new, anonymous social media profile, carefully crafting it to appear like a casual observer of the local art and design scene. I started following key influencers, industry leaders, and publications. I waited. A few weeks later, Sarah posted a celebratory photo of her agency's new office space, tagging several colleagues. It was the perfect opportunity. I casually commented on the photo, not directly, but in a reply to another comment. My comment read, "Looks great." Didn't David from also help with some of the design elements for this? Remember seeing him around your old office a lot. It was a small, seemingly innocent comment. It wasn't a lie. David had, according to Sarah's confession, spent time at her office. But the implication, given the prior blog post and the burgeoning rumors, was clear. Was there more than just professional collaboration happening? Was there an inappropriate connection between these two competing individuals? The comment, as I intended, caught fire. People started to reply, to question, to speculate. Other anonymous accounts, perhaps fueled by genuine curiosity or even rivalries within the industry, started digging. Someone even found the old Instagram photo I had saved and reposted it, highlighting David and Sarah in the background, adding to the growing narrative. The whispers turned into open questions. Clients started to ask about the conflict of interest allegations. Colleagues started to distance themselves from Sarah, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of professional scandal. Her carefully cultivated image as the innovative, trustworthy designer began to fray. The bakery chain, sensitive to public perception, announced they were putting their project on hold, citing unforeseen internal concerns that needed to be resolved before moving forward. It was a veiled slap in the face to both agencies, but everyone knew who the real target was. Sarah's agency lost the pitch, and the ripple effect began to take its toll on her reputation. She called me, of course, after a particularly bad week. Her voice was hoarse, thick with a desperation I had never heard before. "Eleanor, what are you doing? My agency is losing clients. My name is being dragged through the mud. This is you, isn't it? You're ruining my life?" I listened silently to her accusations, her pleas. There was no apology for her betrayal, no acknowledgement of the pain she had caused, just a self-pitying lament about her crumbling career. It confirmed everything I needed to know. She still didn't understand. She only cared about herself, about the comfortable life she was losing. "You said you wanted me to feel a fraction of your pain," she choked out, her voice breaking. "You've succeeded, Eleanor, you've succeeded." And in that moment, hearing the raw anguish in her voice, I felt it. Not triumph, not jubilation, but a profound, chilling sense of emptiness. The revenge wasn't sweet. It was cold, stark, and utterly devoid of satisfaction. It had not brought back the Eleanor who loved Ann Arbor, who cherished quiet evenings with her wife, who believed in a future built on trust. That Eleanor was gone, irrevocably broken by Sarah's actions. The revenge had been a necessary act, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of justice in a world that had suddenly made no sense. But it hadn't healed me. It hadn't made the pain disappear. It had simply left me with a quiet, hollow understanding. I didn't reply to Sarah's call. I hung up the phone, the silence on the other end a stark metaphor for the silence that now filled my heart. My plan had worked. Her professional world was indeed crumbling. Her carefully constructed image had shattered, revealing the deceitful person beneath. And yet, I felt no joy. I walked to the window, looking out at the Ann Arbor streets. The autumn leaves were still vibrant, but their beauty now felt distant, muted. The air was still crisp, but it carried no comfort. My sister Clara came into the room, a warm mug of tea in her hands. She looked at me, her gaze gentle and understanding. "You did what you needed to do, Elle," she said softly, handing me the mug. "You stood up for yourself." I took a sip of the warm tea, the taste bland on my tongue. "I know," I whispered, my voice tired, but it didn't make it go away. The revenge wasn't about healing, it was about balance. She had taken everything from me, and I had in turn taken her carefully constructed professional world. The scales were, in a twisted way, even, but the cost had been immense. I was no longer the quiet librarian who believed in happy endings. I was a woman who had seen the darkness in the human heart and had, in turn, wielded a darkness of her own. My future was uncertain, a blank page waiting to be written, but one thing was clear. I would never again be the trusting, naive Eleanor Vance. The story of my love had ended in tragedy, but the story of my resilience, forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by retribution, was just beginning. Ann Arbor would always be my home, but it would also be the place where I learned that sometimes, justice doesn't feel like victory, but simply like an end. a quiet, resolute end to a chapter that needed to be closed, so that a new, stronger one could finally begin.